Somewhere within walking distance of where you are sitting right now, there's a very good chance a tree is growing that nobody planted, nobody waters it, nobody sprays it, and nobody feeds it. It just quietly thrives out there on the edge of the woods. And once a year, for about 3 weeks, it produces a fruit so intensely sweet that folks who've tasted it fully ripe describe it as something right between a date and a spoonful of honey. Now, that's not a metaphor, friend. That is genuinely the closest comparison most folks can reach for. And the thing that might bother you just a little bit once you know what to look for is that you've probably walked right past it 100 times without ever knowing it was there.
Now, I get exactly why this sounds like a bit of a tall tale. You're probably thinking to yourself, if something really tasted that good and grew that easily without any help at all, surely it'd be sitting right there in every grocery store in town, wouldn't it? Well, that is a completely reasonable assumption. In fact, I understand exactly why you think that, because it's exactly the assumption that kept me from ever trying one for most of my life. It just seems like common sense that the best food makes it to the market.
But if we take a closer look at our agricultural history, the facts show us how genuinely good, genuinely free food quietly disappears from a culture's plate. It doesn't disappear because it stopped being good, it simply vanishes because it just stopped being convenient for anyone to sell. And when a food isn't convenient for the modern supply chain, well, we just slowly forget it ever existed in the first place. Let me introduce you to the American persimmon. The truth is, the tree never actually went anywhere. It grows wild across a huge stretch of the eastern half of this country, right through the Midwest, down the South, and up into the Mid-Atlantic. Now, almost nobody you know has ever eaten one, let alone planted one on purpose. But when it is genuinely, fully ripe, it's one of the sweetest wild foods that grows on this entire continent, just waiting out there in the crisp autumn air. Now hold on just a second. You might be picturing that smooth, orange, apple-shaped fruit you see stacked up at the supermarket. That is a completely different species. That's the Asian persimmon, which is imported and commercially bred specifically for shipping across the country without getting bruised. They're related, sure, but they are genetically distinct plants with very different growing habits. The Native American persimmon is a completely different flavor experience. But there is a catch to our native tree, and it's just a matter of simple biology. An American persimmon has to be completely, fully soft-ripe before it's edible at all. If it's even a little underripe, it is astringent to an almost shocking degree. Just one single bite of an unripe persimmon will pucker your whole mouth instantly and leave it feeling dry as dust. But once it's fully soft, usually right after the first frost of the season, that very same fruit turns into something remarkably sweet, rich, and complex. And right there is the straightforward agricultural problem. For commercial farming, the terms fully soft and shippable are exact opposites. A soft, perfectly ripe native persimmon simply cannot survive a long truck ride across state lines. It doesn't sit nicely on a store shelf, and honestly, it bruises if you so much as look at it wrong. So decades ago, American agriculture largely abandoned our native fruit in favor of the firmer Asian variety that could handle the trip from the orchard to your grocery bag. But even though the farms left it behind, the tree itself just kept on doing what it does best. And this part genuinely surprised me when I first learned about it. These trees are remarkably self-sufficient. They tolerate poor soil and neglect better than almost any fruit tree you deliberately plant in a home orchard. They survive drought, they don't need spraying for pests, and they don't need the kind of fussy pruning a commercial apple tree does. These mature wild trees just thrive out there in fence lines and abandoned fields, fruiting reliably for decades, completely unattended by human hand. Notice what's happening here, friend. Sit with this for just a second, because it's a pattern you'll see again and again once you start looking. A huge amount of what disappeared from the American plate over the last century didn't disappear because it stopped being good. The persimmon didn't fail. The supply chain just didn't want it. Now, if you want to find a wild one for yourself, here is exactly how you do it. First, you wait for the first fall frost. That is your window because the cold helps soften the fruit. Second, you go check along field edges, fence lines, and the borders of wooded areas where they get a bit of sun. And third, look up. You're looking for small orange to amber fruit still hanging on the bare branches because a tree often fruits right as its leaves are falling to the ground. But listen to me now, because this is the one critical rule. I mean this very seriously. Never eat one that isn't completely soft. You want to give it the gentlest possible squeeze with your fingers. If there is any firmness at all, it's not ready, and it will taste genuinely awful and unpleasantly astringent. When it's fully ripe, it should feel almost exactly like a water balloon that's just about ready to give. That's how you know it's perfectly sweet and ready to eat.
I'll admit to you, my own first attempt at this went about as badly as it could have. Years ago, I found one of these trees. The fruit had this nice orange color, hanging low on the branch, and I bit straight into it without checking how soft it was first. I can still remember it. My mouth felt like it had been turned completely inside out for a solid 20 minutes. I genuinely avoided the fruit for years after that. I just picked the wrong one at the wrong moment. It's the exact same mistake almost everyone makes their first time out.
If you want to avoid that gamble entirely and just plant your own, it's genuinely easy to establish these self-sufficient trees right in a home yard. You can buy them from native plant nurseries, often for just a few dollars. You want to plant them in full sun to partial shade. Just one thing to know, check for self-fruiting varieties, or make sure you get a male and a female tree so they'll cross-pollinate and fruit well together. Once they mature, you'll enjoy reliable harvests for decades with essentially zero input from you.
When you compare the two, there's really no store-bought equivalent. Think about what you'd pay for specialty imported sweet fruit at a grocery store. You're talking several dollars for just one piece that's traveled halfway across the world, versus a native tree that, once established, produces pounds of fruit every single fall for decades for absolutely free, with zero ongoing cost or care. The math just isn't close. It's one of the very few genuinely free, high-value food sources left growing uncultivated right in plain sight. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and plant an orchard this weekend, or even tomorrow. Just do this one thing for me. If you've got a wooded edge or a fence line nearby, just take one gentle walk through it this fall. Wait until after that first frost, and simply look up into the bare branches to see if there's fruit still hanging on. That's it. Just one walk. You don't need to do anything else to see if this old harvest is real. Let's tie a bow on everything we've covered today in this explainer. The American persimmon is native to the eastern half of the US. It tastes remarkably like honey and dates, but only when fully soft ripe. It was abandoned by commercial stores simply because soft fruit doesn't ship well on trucks. It needs essentially zero care to grow, and you can find them hanging on bare branches right after the first frost. So tell me down in the comments if you've got wild persimmon trees growing near you, or if you've ever tried one, whether it was perfectly ripe or, just like me, badly unripe. I read every single one, and the plant that gets the most comments is the one we'll dig into next. Subscribe if this helped you out, friend, and I'll see you next time.